What's up everyone? Alex here. When it comes to real-time strategy games, I know a lot of people love Warcraft and Starcraft, but I've always seen myself a Command & Conquer guy. I remember playing my first Command & Conquer and just creating a massive armada of troops that are comprised of hundreds, if not thousands, of units. And the sheer satisfaction of drawing that huge selection box to highlight literally thousands upon thousands of troops just to decimate that little tiny soldier that just kind of wandered into your base accidentally is just so satisfying. So when the folks over at Valiant Tactics EX wanted to sponsor me to check out their game, which is a deck building real-time strategy game, and yes, you heard that right, I was obviously understandably skeptical. But what I love about getting to try games like this is the sheer surprise that I feel when I play something new and refreshing. But before anything else, let's address the elephant in the room. Valiant Tactics EX is a free-to-play game available now on PC with gacha mechanics. I know that the mere mention of gacha spells doom for anything else that follows it, but I would like to invite you to consider all of the elements that I want to talk about aside from the gacha, because there's some really good ideas here that are worth mentioning. As I have said, Valiant Tactics EX blends deck building with real-time strategy. I'll be the first to say that I am absolutely terrible at deck building. I avoid it like the plague. But somehow, I was able to play through a good portion of Valiant Tactics EX with just the default deck alone. And sure enough, I even cloned said deck and just started upgrading some of the weaker cards with the rare ones that I got through pulls. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. To win battles in Valiant Tactics EX, you must either defeat a large number of your opponent's troops, or destroy their base located on the other side of the map. You achieve this by partaking in the game's unique blend of tactical and active combat phases. The tactical phase pauses the action on screen and lets you play cards from your hand, which are randomly selected from your chosen deck. Cards can either be units you deploy on the battlefield, magic spells that require mages to cast, and various buffs, debuffs, and ways to draw even more cards from the deck. Much like games like Hearthstone, you'll have a currency that you'll spend to activate cards. But on top of that, you also have an EX currency that you can spend to activate even more cards. The catch-22 is that there is a cap to how much you can spend this EX currency, which is determined by the maximum points you can spend in that round. So, for example, if you were able to spend 3 points in the current round, even if you have 6 EX points available, you can only spend them on cards that have a maximum cost of 3. Apart from playing cards from your hand, you're also able to direct your units while the action is paused, though you do have a time limit that forces you to be deliberate with your choices, but also ensures that the pace of combat moves along. When the active phase begins, the game plays out in real time like any other RTS, complete with units to control and abilities to activate in real time. I also want to point out that regardless of the mode you choose, the battlefield will stay the same. It's because of this that much of your strategy will revolve around the types of units you choose to bring into battle as it unfolds, while also properly positioning your units to take advantage of your opponent's weaknesses. One question that I had to ask myself is whether or not using the same battlefield made the battles feel too similar. While I can't disagree with that initial sentiment, the excitement from battle comes from the unpredictable nature of deck building. You're not guaranteed to have the best cards on hand, same with your opponent. So part of the challenge and strategy is also mitigating these circumstances by playing your hands and your movements as best as possible. I should also point out that unlike games like Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering, you cannot discard cards at the beginning of the match. This is probably because of the existence of the EX currency pool, which lets you pull more cards early should you wish. When all is said and done, however, you might be asking yourself, how exactly would one learn how to play the game properly? This is done by both its confusingly labeled tutorials and lessons modes, found under solo play. Personally, I found nothing really different between both modes, though I do want to point out that completing each will yield you with free tickets that'll let you get new cards. Finishing one particular lesson will even win you the opportunity to have 1,000 redraws, allowing you to keep pulling cards each time and redrawing them for a maximum of 1,000 times. I aimed to pull at least 3 shinies when I did this. To that end, I do want to point out that because Valiant Tactics EX is a deck builder, having a bunch of super powerful rare cards won't simply let you bulldoze the rest of the units in the game, as combat also follows a combat triangle that has archers defeating infantry, infantry defeating cavalry, and cavalry defeating archers. There are other units outside of this combat triangle, and their functions vary greatly. For example, as I mentioned earlier, powerful AoE magic spells can only be cast if a mage is present on the field. All that said, I do want to be real here and talk about the things that I'd like the developers to address in the coming months. For starters, moving units in both phases feels sluggish and unresponsive. That's because both selecting and moving units use left click. If the developers can let us use right click to command units to move, this would make things feel a ton better. Also, I'd love for the ability to sort cards while building my deck. As of right now, the order of the cards feels a bit disorganized, and I'd love to be able to sort the deck by a specific parameter so that I can easily replace weaker cards with better ones in my collection. We've only touched upon how the game teaches you its combat and how combat works, so you'd be happy to know that there's also a playable campaign that has its own set of mechanics. Aside from participating in combat and engaging in a narrative told through a visual novel presentation, you'll also be able to use tickets to upgrade different aspects of your army. These upgrades range from improving your unit's attacks to giving them more HP. Admittedly, the drip feed of these tickets as I played more of the campaign really got me hooked more than the story itself. And its story can be quite quirky too, when it wants to. But alas, this is a game about war, so much of the plot revolves around what's going on with the different factions and countries featured, and much less about the characters fighting the war, let alone the ones affected by it. The game does feature voice acting, but only as short responses during combat. So when I think about my time with Valiant Tactics EX, I think about the time when I'm like building my decks to try to figure out the right combinations of cards to bring into battle, knowing full well that I'm going to have full control over them once the battle begins. Now, obviously there's going to be some randomization elements there, but I feel like one of the things that I've learned by playing a lot of deck building games over the past several years is that your choice to try to mitigate that is really where the heart and soul of this kind of game is all about. And combining that with real-time strategy is a very intriguing prospect. Now, most real-time strategy games have different maps, so some players might think like, oh, it doesn't have a lot of variety. But the variety actually comes from the units that you bring towards battle. And of course, you don't actually know what units your opponents are going to bring with them, which is what makes this kind of gameplay style really exciting. Ultimately, if you're looking for a really good distraction from all the other games that you're playing, I think Valiant Tactics EX is a pretty good game to check out, especially if you're already on your computer and ready to play a game. I think it's really convenient, it's really fun to learn, and there's a lot of different cards that you can use. And the campaign is pretty fun, especially if you're like a huge visual novel fan. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and if you like this video, please click that like button, post a comment telling me what you liked about it, and subscribe to the channel for more RPG news in the future. Your support helps the channel out tremendously. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.